The answer is not in genetics, luck, or external circumstances. The answer is in you, in the habits that you develop as a parent every day. During my years of experience as a psychiatrist and after working with thousands of families, I have discovered that there are 7 specific habits that make the difference between raising vulnerable children and raising mentally strong children. Hello, I'm Marian Rojas Estapé, and today I want to share with you something that can completely transform your children's lives. Have you ever wondered why some children seem to have extraordinary mental strength while others collapse at the first difficulty? Why are some children who face challenges bravely and others who flee at the first obstacle? I'm going to warn you about something. What I'm going to share with you today is going to challenge many of your beliefs about parenting. You're going to discover that some of the things you think are protecting your children are actually weakening them, and you're going to learn that building mental strength in a child has nothing to do with being tough and cold-hearted. Quite the opposite. If you stick with me until the end of this video, you'll not only learn about these 7 transformative habits, but I'll also give you the specific tools to implement them starting tomorrow. Because as I always say, knowledge without action is useless, and action without knowledge can be dangerous. The first habit that makes the difference between a parent who raises strong children and one who doesn't is something that seems contradictory, but makes perfect neurobiological sense: validating your children's emotions without overprotecting them from life's natural consequences. Let me explain what's happening in your child's brain when they feel intense emotions. When a child experiences sadness, frustration, fear, or anger, their limbic system, that primitive part of the brain that manages emotions, becomes intensely activated. At that moment, the amygdala, the cerebral cortex, is sending alarm signals throughout the nervous system. Now, as parents, we have 2 options. The first, which is the most natural and instinctive, is to run to rescue our child from that uncomfortable emotion. It's okay, my love. Don't be sad. Come, mom will sort this out for you. There's no reason to get upset. This response, although born of the purest love, sends a dangerous message to the child's brain. Difficult emotions are bad, you can't handle them alone, and there will always be someone to rescue you. The second option, which is the one that characterizes parents who raise mentally strong children, is to validate the emotion, allowing the child to process it. I see that you are very angry because your sister took your toy. I understand that you feel sad because your friend didn't want to play with you. It's normal for you to feel afraid in this new situation. What difference does this make on a neurological level? When we validate without rescuing, we are helping the child's prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation and decision-making, to strengthen. It's as if we were exercising that mental muscle. Let me give you a practical example. Your 8-year-old son comes home crying at school because a classmate said something hurtful to him. The natural impulse is to say, ignore him, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Or worse, I'm going to talk to his mother tomorrow. A parent who raises mentally strong children would say, I can see that those words hurt you a lot. It's normal to feel that way when someone says something hurtful to us. Tell me, how do you think you could handle this situation if it happened again? The difference is huge. In the first case, you're teaching your child that emotions are enemies, that they should be avoided, and that there will always be someone external to solve their problems. In the second case, you're teaching them that emotions are valuable information and that they have internal resources to manage them. But be careful, validating doesn't mean condoning inappropriate behavior. If your child is angry and decides to hit their sibling, you're validating the emotion, but you're setting clear boundaries around the behavior. I understand that you're angry. That emotion is valid, but hitting is not allowed. Let's find a more appropriate way to express your anger. Neuroscience tells us something fascinating. When a child learns to name and validate their emotions, the activation of the amygdala decreases and the connections with the prefrontal cortex are strengthened. In other words, you are literally building a more resilient brain. And before moving on to the second habit, if you are finding this content valuable for your family, I ask that you like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for joining me on this journey towards more conscious parenting and stronger children. See you in the next video where we will continue exploring practical tools for the well-being of our families. Each like tells me that this message is reaching parents who truly want to raise stronger children, and your subscription allows me to continue researching and sharing tools that can transform the lives of our children. Plus, when you subscribe and activate the bell, you make sure you don't miss any strategies that can help you on this beautiful but challenging journey of parenthood. The second habit is one of the most powerful, but also one of the most difficult to implement in our current culture, obsessed with results and immediate success. Parents who raise mentally strong children teach their children to value the process, the effort, and the learning over the end result. Let me tell you something that really struck me in my office. A few months ago, a mother came in with her 12-year-old daughter. The girl was academically brilliant, she had always gotten excellent grades, but now she refused to go to school. The reason for this was that for the first time in her life, she had failed a math test and her world had fallen apart. During our conversation, I discovered that this mother, with the best of intentions, had built her daughter's entire self-esteem on her results. "You are so smart. I am so proud of your grades. You are at the top of your class." When the results did not come, the girl felt that she had lost all her value as a person. What is happening here neurologically when we only praise results? We are activating the brain's reward system in a very specific way. The child learns that their worth as a person depends on getting that external reinforcement. Their brain literally becomes addicted to external validation and develops what we call a fixed mindset. In contrast, when we praise effort, perseverance, strategy used, or the ability to learn from mistakes, we are strengthening the neural connections associated with resilience and what Carol Dweck calls a growth mindset. Here are some concrete examples of how to make this shift. Instead of saying, "You're so smart," when your child gets a good grade, try, "I see that you worked really hard studying and it paid off." Instead of, "You're the best player on the team," try, "I love how much you've improved your technique with all that training." But here's the hardest part for many parents. We also have to change our language when things don't go well. When your child fails a test, instead of consoling them by saying, "That's okay, you're so smart," try, "Let's discuss what study strategies we can improve for next time." One of the most powerful moments you can create as a parent is to help your child find the learning in every failure. When my youngest son was 10 years old and lost a swimming competition that I had set high expectations for, instead of comforting him with empty phrases, we sat down that night to discuss what he had learned from the experience. He told me that he had discovered that he got very nervous before competitions and that it affected his performance. Together we developed breathing and visualization strategies. 6 months later, not only had he improved his swimming, but he had learned anxiety management tools that have served him for a lifetime. Brain neuroplasticity is extraordinary in children. Every time we approach a challenge as a learning opportunity instead of a common failure, we are literally rewiring their brains for resilience. But beware of a common mistake. This does not mean that we cannot celebrate achievements. Of course, we can be proud when our children reach their goals. The key is in how we do it. We celebrate the journey taken, the effort invested, the skills developed, not just the trophy. Ultimately, the third habit that sets apart parents who raise mentally resilient children is perhaps the most counterintuitive of all, allowing their children to experience frustration and teaching them specific tools to manage it. In our current culture, frustration has become enemy number one of childhood. As parents, we rush to remove any obstacles that might cause our children discomfort. If the puzzle is difficult, we solve it for them. If the video game is hard, we pass it on to them. If the schoolwork is difficult, we do it for them. But here's the problem. Frustration is not the enemy. It's the personal trainer of mental toughness. Every time we deprive our children of the opportunity to experience and overcome frustration, we are robbing them of the opportunity to develop one of the most important mental muscles, tolerance for discomfort. Let me explain what happens in the brain when we experience frustration. When we are faced with an obstacle that we cannot immediately resolve, a complex neural network is activated that includes the prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate gyrus, and several regions of the limbic system. This activation, although uncomfortable, is absolutely necessary for the development of perseverance and creativity. Neuroimaging studies show us something fascinating. Children who have learned to tolerate frustration develop a more robust, better connected, and more efficient prefrontal cortex. It's as if each well-managed experience of frustration is a training session for the brain. But here's the key. Allowing frustration does not mean abandoning our children to their fate. Parents who raise mentally strong children act as emotional coaches, not problem solvers. Let me tell you a story that a mother shared with me in consultation. Her 7-year-old son was trying to build a very tall tower with building blocks. Time and time again the tower kept falling over and the boy became more frustrated. The mother's instinct was to help him or suggest that he build something simpler, but she remembered our earlier conversation and decided to try a different approach. She sat down next to him and said, "I see that the tower keeps falling over and that's frustrating you. Frustration is that uncomfortable feeling that comes when something goes our way, right?" The boy nodded. You know what? Frustration is like a very strict coach. It shows up to teach us something. What do you think it's trying to teach you now? The boy thought about it and after a few minutes he said, "Maybe I need to make the base wider." The mother validated his thinking. What a clever observation. Do you want to try that strategy? What happened next was magical. Not only did he build the tallest tower he had ever built, but he had learned something much more valuable, that frustration contains useful information, and that he had the internal resources to process it and act on it. But teaching how to manage frustration requires specific tools. One of the most powerful is the breathing pause technique. When you see your child getting frustrated, teach him to stop, take 3 deep breaths, and ask himself, what is this situation trying to teach me? Another essential tool is reframing. Instead of seeing frustration as an enemy, teach your child to see it as valuable information. My frustration is telling me that this problem is important to me and that I need to think of new strategies. It's also crucial to teach the difference between productive and destructive frustration. Frustration is productive when it motivates us to seek new solutions, try harder, or ask for help in an appropriate way. It's destructive when it leads us to give up, explode emotionally, or blame others. One exercise I highly recommend to parents is to create moments of controlled frustration. Give your child challenges that you know will be difficult, but that are within their capabilities if they apply themselves and persevere. This could be a puzzle that's a bit harder than usual, a recipe with multiple steps, or even a challenging educational video game. The important thing is to be there as an emotional coach during these moments, not to solve the problem for them, but to help them process the emotions that arise and develop coping strategies. The 4th habit is essential but often misunderstood. Encourage our children's progressive autonomy without abandoning them emotionally. Parents who raise mentally strong children understand that overdependence is the silent enemy of mental strength. In my practice, I increasingly see adolescents and young adults who come to me with paralyzing anxiety when faced with life's most basic decisions. Why? Because for years their parents, with all the love in the world, have made all the decisions for them. When a child never has the opportunity to choose, to make mistakes, and to learn from their errors, their brain does not develop the neural networks necessary for autonomous decision-making. It is as if you had a muscle that you never use. It atrophies. Neuroscience shows us that the prefrontal cortex responsible for decision-making, planning, and executive control is strengthened precisely when we use it to solve problems and make age-appropriate decisions. But here is the trick. Autonomy must be progressive and developmentally appropriate. A 3-year-old child can choose between 2 breakfast options, but cannot decide whether or not to go to school. A 15-year-old teenager can manage their study schedule, but may not yet be ready to decide on certain aspects of their social life without guidance. Let me give you a practical example that transformed the life of a family who came to my practice. They had a 10-year-old son who was brilliant but basically incapable of organizing himself. Every morning was a drama. His mother had to remind him about everything from brushing his teeth to getting his school bag. We implemented what we call scaffolded autonomy. We created a system where the child was responsible for getting ready for school, but with initial support that was gradually removed. The first week his mother helped him create a visual checklist of all the morning tasks. The second week he was responsible for following the list, but she reminded him to look at it. The third week he was fully responsible for following his routine and she only intervened if he asked for help. As a result, within a month he had not only become autonomous in his morning routine, but had developed a sense of competence and pride that carried over into other areas of his life. The key is to identify which decisions and responsibilities are appropriate for each age and temperament. An introverted child may need more time to develop social autonomy, while a more impulsive child may need more structure in decision-making. One of the most common mistakes is confusing autonomy with abandonment. Fostering autonomy doesn't mean leaving our children to fend for themselves emotionally. It means being available as advisors and emotional support while they practice taking charge of their own lives. For example, if your teen is having a conflict with a friend, instead of calling the friend's parents or telling them exactly what to do, you might say, "I can see that this situation is troubling you. Have you thought about your options? I'm here to listen and help you think through the consequences of each option, but ultimately the decision is yours." Another powerful tool is what I call low-stakes decision-making. Constantly look for opportunities for your child to make decisions that have natural, but not severe, consequences. What to wear? How to organize their room? What extracurricular activity to choose? How to spend their pocket money? Each of these decisions is an opportunity to strengthen their autonomy muscle, and when they make mistakes, because they will, don't rush to their rescue. Help them process what they've learned from the experience. Remember that the goal is not to raise children who never make mistakes, but children who know how to learn from their mistakes and who are confident in their ability to make decisions and deal with the consequences. The fifth habit is one of the most challenging for many parents in our time: setting clear and consistent limits while maintaining a strong emotional connection with your children. Parents who raise mentally strong children understand that limits are not walls that stand in the way, but structures that provide security and freedom to grow. In my work, I have observed two equally damaging extremes. On the one hand, parents who confuse love with permissiveness and who avoid setting limits for fear that their children will not love them. On the other hand, parents who set limits through fear, threat, or emotional coldness. Neuroscience teaches us something fascinating about limits. Children's brains literally need structure to develop healthily. When a child lives in an environment with clear and consistent boundaries, their nervous system feels safe, which allows the prefrontal cortex to develop properly. But here's the key. Effective boundaries are not imposed from blind authority, but are set from a place of love and explained with logic appropriate for the child's age. I'm going to tell you the story of a mother who came to my office completely exhausted. Her 8-year-old daughter had taken control of the house. She decided what to have for dinner, when she went to bed, what programs to watch on television. The mother told me, "I don't want to be like my father, who was very authoritarian. I want my daughter to feel free and loved." Quote. I explained something that completely changed her perspective. Children don't interpret the absence of boundaries as love, they interpret it as an absence of care. When you don't set boundaries, your daughter gets the message that you don't care enough to protect and guide her. We implemented what I call the firm, fair, immediate, related, and maintainable method. Fair means that the limit should be appropriate for the age and situation. You can't ask a 4-year-old to sit still for 2 hours, but you can ask him not to hit his brother. Immediate means that consequences should be applied as close as possible to the moment the limit is crossed. A child's brain needs this immediacy to create clear neural connections between action and consequence. Related means that the consequence should be logically related to the behavior. If your child doesn't pick up his toys, the logical consequence is that the toys won't be available for a while, not that he won't have dessert. Maintainable means that you should be able to stick to the limit you set. Don't give consequences that you can't follow through on or that will punish the family more than the child. But most important of all is how you communicate these limits. Parents who raise mentally strong children use what I call connected limits. Instead of "because I said so," they use phrases like, "I'm setting this limit because I love you and I want you to learn how to take care of yourself and others." For example, your 10-year-old wants to go to bed an hour later on weekdays. Instead of a flat-out no or giving in to avoid conflict, you can say, "I understand that you want to stay up later, and I see that you're a grown-up." The 9:30 limit exists because your brain needs rest to function well the next day. How about staying up later on Fridays? This response validates their desire for autonomy. Explain the reason for the limit logically and offer an alternative that respects both their needs and the family rules. Another crucial aspect is consistency. Children need to know what to expect. If the limit is one thing today and another tomorrow, depending on your mood, you're creating anxiety rather than security. But consistency doesn't mean rigidity. There are times for flexibility, especially when your child is showing maturity, when there are exceptional circumstances, or when you realize that a limit needs to be adjusted as they get older. One of the most powerful tools is to involve children in creating some family boundaries. When they participate in setting the rules, they are much more likely to follow them because they feel they have been heard and are part of the process. The sixth habit that characterizes parents who raise mentally strong children is teaching specific problem-solving skills rather than solving problems for them. This habit is crucial because in adulthood, the ability to face and solve challenges independently will be one of the most important predictors of mental well-being and success. In my practice, I constantly see bright young adults who come to me with severe anxiety, not because they lack intelligence or external resources, but because they never develop confidence in their own ability to solve problems. Their parents, with the best of intentions, solved so many problems for them during childhood that they entered adulthood without having developed this essential mental muscle. Neuroplasticity teaches us that the brain grows stronger through practice. Every time a child faces a problem, considers options, makes a decision, and experiences the consequences, they are literally building and strengthening the neural networks responsible for critical thinking and conflict resolution. Parents who raise mentally strong children act as problem-solving coaches, not problem solvers. The difference is subtle and transformative. Let me give you a concrete example. A few months ago, a mother came to my office concerned that her 11-year-old son was having recurring problems with a classmate who was bothering him during recess. The mother's first reaction had been to talk to the teacher and the parents of the other child, but after our conversation she decided to try a different approach. Instead of solving the problem for him, she sat down with her son and said, "I can see that this situation with your classmate is really affecting you. It seems to me that you have a problem that needs solving. What options do you think you have?" At first the boy responded with the typical, "I don't know, tell me what to do." But the mother persisted. "I trust that you can think of some options. Take your time." After thinking about it, the boy came up with 3 options: ignore the classmate, talk to the teacher himself, or try to talk to the classmate directly. The mother did not evaluate the options as good or bad, but rather helped him think through the possible consequences of each. If you decide to ignore it, what do you think might happen? If you talk to the teacher, how might she react? If you talk to him directly, what might you say? Ultimately, the child decided to talk assertively to the peer first, and if that didn't work, then he would talk to the teacher. The result was not only was the conflict resolved, but the child developed confidence in his ability to handle difficult situations. But teaching problem solving requires a method. Help your child clearly define what the problem is. Children often feel overwhelmed because they see the situation as a general chaos rather than a specific problem that can be addressed. Encourage your child to think through all possible options, even the ones that seem unrealistic at first. The goal is to expand his creative thinking. Help him consider the possible consequences of each option. What could go right? What could go wrong? What resources would he need for each option? Support your child in making a decision based on his analysis. Resist the temptation to influence his choice too much. After implementing the solution, Help them evaluate how it worked, what they learned, and what they would do differently next time. One of the most important keys is to resist the temptation to jump to the solution when you see your child struggling with a problem. Your protective instinct will scream at you to save them the pain by quickly solving everything. But remember, every problem you solve for them is a missed opportunity for mental empowerment. This doesn't mean giving up on them. It means shifting your role from problem solver to facilitator. Ask powerful questions. What are their options? What do you think would happen that way? How would you feel if you chose that option? What would it take for that solution to work? It's also important to teach children that not all problems have perfect solutions. Sometimes life presents us with situations where all options have downsides, and that's okay. The skill lies in choosing the best option available at that moment and adapting accordingly. The seventh and final habit is perhaps the most powerful of all because it encompasses all of the above. Modeling for our children the emotional regulation and growth mindset that we want them to develop. Children learn much more from what they see than from what they hear, and this has a solid neurobiological basis. Mirror neurons discovered a few decades ago show us that children's brains are literally designed to imitate and internalize the emotional and behavioral patterns they observe in their primary caregivers. This means that you can give your child all the speeches in the world about how to handle frustration, but if he sees you explode every time you drop something or make a mistake, his brain is going to register that this is the normal way to react to difficulties. In my clinical experience, I have observed that the most resilient families are not those where parents never make mistakes or never get stressed, but those where parents model how to manage mistakes and stress in a healthy way. Let me tell you a personal anecdote that perfectly illustrates this point. A few years ago, I was preparing a very important presentation for my job and my computer crashed, losing hours of work. My children were in the next room and overheard my initial reaction, which was not exactly a model of emotional regulation. After a few minutes of frustration, I realized I had a valuable opportunity. I went to my children and said, "Did you hear that mommy is really upset? I lost an important job and my first reaction was to get really frustrated. But now I'm going to stop, take 3 deep breaths, and think about what my options are for how to fix this." I did it in front of them. I took conscious breaths. Did I verbalize my options? Can I get angrier and not fix anything? Can I try to make up some of the work? Or can I start over with what I've learned? I chose the third option and explained why. The result, months later, when my youngest son got frustrated because a drawing he had drawn on his tablet got erased without me telling him, he stopped, took 3 deep breaths, and said, "Mommy, I'm going to think about what my options are." This is the power of modeling. Children don't need perfect parents, they need parents who teach them how to be resilient and imperfect humans. But modeling emotional regulation requires awareness and practice. We often operate on autopilot, especially when we're stressed or tired. Here are some specific strategies you can implement. Strategy 1. The mindful pause. When you feel an intense emotion coming on, especially in front of your children, stop and say out loud, "I need a moment to calm down." This not only gives you time to regulate yourself, but it teaches your children that it's normal and healthy to take emotional pauses. Strategy 2. Verbalize your internal process. Children can't see what's going on in your head, so make it visible. "I'm feeling really frustrated right now because I have so much to do and so little time. I'm feeling worried about tomorrow's meeting, but I know that worrying won't change anything, so I'm going to focus on preparing as best I can." Strategy 3. Model how you learn from your mistakes. When you make a mistake, especially if it affects your children, model the process of responsibility and learning. "I made a mistake by reacting the way I did when you spilled the juice. I let myself get carried away by the stress, and that's not okay. I'm sorry, and I'll try to respond better next time." But modeling goes beyond emotional regulation. It also involves demonstrating a growth mindset in your own life. How do you react when you don't know how to do something? Do you say, "I'm not good at math"? Or do you say, "I haven't mastered these types of math problems yet"? How do you talk about challenges? Do you see them as threats or as opportunities for growth? How do you relate to failure? Do you avoid it at all costs or do you see it as valuable information? I remember a mother who came to my office concerned that her 12-year-old daughter would give up immediately on any task that seemed difficult to her.